For those in Arizona, I want to say good morning and welcome you for your second cup of coffee. For those of you who are calling from the East Coast, it will be in the early afternoon, and we also have people from the other side of the Atlantic. For you, it's already in the evening. Welcome everyone for our fourth and last event in the series Unholy Alliance, Nationalism and Christianity. If you followed us throughout the series, you know we started with looking at the Protestant church during the Nazi regime in the 1930s and 1940s. We continued with the situation in the United States with white evangelicalism and nationalism in the United States in more recent years and decades. Followed up with Anna Maria Orla-Bukowska from Krakow about Poland, the situation in Poland, and she's with us again tonight. Thank you for being with us on a Friday evening. And we will finish today that series with Katya Tolstaya, whom I'm going to introduce in a moment. I am Björn Krondorfer. I'm the director of the Martin Springer Institute. The institute was founded 20 years ago by Doris Martin and her husband, Ralph Martin. Doris, as many of you know, is a survivor from Poland, from the town of Będzin, and one of the women labor camps administered by Gross Rosen in Poland. We are very happy that we've been here for 20 years to offer public educational programs, and we will continue for many decades to come, I hope. I want to let you know that possibly we will do another Zoom conversation series in May that will lead up to the infamous pogrom or race riots in Tulsa, Oklahoma. At the end of this month, May 30 to June 2nd, I believe, there was a major anti-Black race riot in Oklahoma, in Tulsa. It's the 100th anniversary. This happened in 1921. So we may, if we get it together, do a smaller conversation series leading up to this event to commemorate and remember this as well. Katya, thank you so much for joining us. It is wonderful to have you with us. We hope we will have no technical difficulties with you talking from Amsterdam. If we do, we just take a few seconds or half a minute of a break, and hopefully you can reconnect, but maybe it's not an issue and everything will just go fine. This conversation will be recorded, and eventually you will find it on our YouTube channel of the Martin Springer Institute. Let me introduce Katya. Katya Tolstaya is the chair of theology and religion in post-trauma societies, and she's also on the Faculty of Religion and Theology at the Vrije University of Amsterdam. She's a founding director of the Institute of the Academic Study of Eastern Christianity. She's also the founding president of the International Association of Post-Soviet Theology and the Study of Religion. As you can tell from her different titles, her main research interest is to establish a new field of an interreligious post-Soviet theology, but embedded within an interdisciplinary framework of post-traumatic and post-totalitarian societies and the studies that go along with those societies. She has been visiting professor and a research fellow in various countries, and I will just mention 4 of them to show you the scope of her research activity: in Kazakhstan, in Ukraine, in Switzerland, and in Finland. In her previous research, she explored the theology of Karl Barth and the literature of Dostoevsky and Bakhtin. To promote the research field of post-Soviet theology, she established international networks, research networks, for international scholars and stakeholders for post-Soviet studies, post-Holocaust theology, Gulag studies, and transitional studies, and transitional justice studies. It is actually through that venue of post-Holocaust, post-Soviet studies that she and I met and actually have collaborated already in the past with each other. Katya, welcome. We always like to start with a few more personal words from you to kind of to help us understand who you are, where your interest comes from in that particular research field, how you ended up in Amsterdam teaching and researching on issues regarding Russia, the post-Stalin Soviet Union, the Russian Orthodox Church, the issues of trauma. How did you get to the research topic? How did you get to Amsterdam?
Thank you, Bjorn. And first of all, thank you everyone for having me. I'm looking very much forward to our conversation. Bjorn told me to sit straight and still, because otherwise I can freeze or something will go wrong. And this is totally against my nature, because I'm a very emotional person and would otherwise move around, and I don't know what to do. So I'm kind of having a harness here, and I'm sitting very still, trying to not to freeze on your Zoom. Next to me is my dog, and I hope he will not bark. If he will, please excuse me. Those are Zoom times, and they enable us to connect in these times of social distancing. And he's not used to be locked down, so he is always beside me, so he wouldn't understand if I moved him to another room. So I hope he won't bark. So it is very nice to be here and to tell you a couple of hours. Now he will bark, you see. To tell you about the nationalism in the current Russian Orthodoxy, and it leads me indeed to the beginning. Sorry. Please forgive me, those are really strange times. I have to explain. My daughter came from Switzerland for the first time since New Year, and this is all the commotion because of that. So again, the times of lockdown. I'm sorry. So I came to the Netherlands as a refugee immediately after the falling of the Soviet Union, and I started to study theology in the Netherlands in 1995, I think. And really the very first thing I heard was theology nach Auschwitz, theology after the Auschwitz. That was really the very first, I think, the very first hour of my studying Protestant theology at a very small city of Kampen at the Protestant University of the Netherlands. And then already I thought, okay, after 7 years studying theology, after I graduate, something like a theology after Gulag will emerge, and then I will be able to join this field of theology. And then I graduated on a very different topic, and then I wrote my PhD thesis on, indeed, on Bjorn mentioned it already, on systematic theology of Karl Barth and the writings of the Russian great writer Dostoevsky. And still this theology after the Gulag didn't emerge, but the socio-political developments in Russia foremost, but also in all other post-Soviet countries were such that really an urgent reflection on the past was needed, I thought. And then I started this project of a theology after the Gulag, because I thought we really need an effort which might eventually be comparable to the great effort of post-Auschwitz theology. and we have to make it an interdisciplinary effort. And there is so much going on was so much going on in the last decades with great scholars, Bjorn amongst them, that, and also theology directions like theology after apartheid or liberation theology, and nothing of a kind was happening in the post-Soviet countries systematically. There was no systematic reflection on the past, nor on theology or systematic reflections on what can Orthodoxy contribute to the reflection about the past. And I thought this project is just needed. So I started it as explicitly as an interdisciplinary and interreligious project to connect people and scholars and to reflect on the past. So this is, I work at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam for, I think, more than 10 years. I'm the vice dean there and the dean of research at the Faculty of Religion and Theology. So that's about me.
Yeah, and so much more, but it really helps to understand us from where you come from and what the interest is, and how much a pioneer you are in the field of developing some theology and some ethical religious thinking on the legacy of the Gulag in the Soviet Union in comparison to other places. I want to stay with the Gulag for a little bit as we slowly approach the issue of the Russian Orthodox Church and nationalism or patriotism in the Soviet in Russia today, not the Soviet Union. The Gulag prison system, the roots go back to Tsarist Russia, certainly reached the atrocious height of its during the Stalin era in the Soviet Union. And some would say to a certain extent, it might even continue today if we follow the news on what's happening. The Gulag is one of your research areas, especially from the perspective of prisoners, from the perspective of their experiences, of their traumatic experiences. It's also probably fair to say that, or we know for sure that Stalin's Soviet Union did not like religion and did not necessarily like the Russian Orthodox Church. So many priests ended up in the Gulag system as well. What is the national memory today about those priests who were in the Gulag system as prisoners? What is post-Soviet Russia? Is post-Soviet Russia commemorating them?
Yeah, thank you. This is a very important question, Bjorn. And let me come back to you naming me a pioneer. I'm only, I think, a pioneer in trying to connect people to each other and to think things through systematically, because there are many great scholars in Russia and in former Soviet republics. We have one of them amongst us. And they are really great in rethinking the past from different disciplinary angles, and helping me also in carrying this project. So I'm not. I think I have a much more modest role in just bringing people together and trying to systematize our different fields of research and our questions, and to learn from other fields of experience. And this is extremely important in this post-Gulag time, and in reflection on the role of religion during the communist times and in the Gulags, because the project which we have, it doesn't fall together with the Gulag under Stalin, because maybe for those of you who might not know, there is this perception of the whole Soviet system as a large Gulag. So the Soviet dissidents in the 70s, they were talking about the small zone of the gulags and the large zone of where they lived, so, which was obviously the whole country. And interesting in this regard is that there is no systematic reflection yet about what has happened with different people, because this system was absolutely random in respect to its victims. Anyone could become a victim, and this is a great difference of the Russian repressive system and, for example, Nazi system. Anyone could become a victim, even the perpetrators of or the party members or the KGB members could become victims, and these positions of victim, perpetrator, spectator, they changed very quickly. They could change very quickly. The involvement of the church is also a very painful thing there, and the complicity of the church, because there are indeed many martyrs, and the many martyrs which are sanctified, which became saints after the perestroika. And it is also very telling that the church sanctified twice as much saints after the perestroika than in the whole history of the church in the 2000 years. And almost all of these martyrs are priests and martyrs for faith. So there is this great trend of memory politics, which sanctifies martyrs for faith and priests. But also this is under the current social political circumstances. Also, this is a very complicated matter, because the church sanctified them. They are saints. Obviously, they are commemorated as saints, but there was no systematic reflection on what has happened, or how do these saints, for example, what does it mean for people who were not priests? Shouldn't they be also sanctified, for example, like in Armenian church, which just sanctified all the martyrs of the regime? So there are a lot of questions which are unanswered still. So the church does some efforts to commemorate them, and people are sanctified, but still I think systematic reflection on very difficult questions has not taken place yet, and maybe is avoided by sanctification of so many saints. So it all has different sides. So it is, of course, yeah. I hear an echo. So there is the straightforward answer is yes, there is commemoration of these priests.
You're already talking about priests and saints in the Orthodox Church. For those of us who don't know much about the Russian Orthodox Church, and we may know perhaps something about Roman Catholicism, maybe Protestantism, maybe Judaism, maybe none of the above, but how would you characterize the Russian Orthodox Church, very basic and in brief terms, how characterize the differences to other forms of Christianity? In Protestant Americanism, American Protestantism, there are no saints, there are no martyrs in that particular way. So tell us maybe, or sketch out a few differences for us before we look at the unholy alliance between Christianity and nationalism.
Yes, very quickly maybe. Well, I'm a systematic theologian as to my main expertise. So I'm a specialist in dogmas, and I can talk to you for ages about different dogmatic differences, which are actually not so many between Orthodoxy on the one hand and Catholicism and Protestantism on the other hand. The main dogmatic difference is the so-called question of the filioque, and this question belongs to the notion of Trinity, of the Holy Trinity. The Orthodox Church believes that the Holy Spirit, the procession of the Holy Spirit happens from God the Father, while the Catholics have added in the early church history to that, and through the Son, and the Protestants took it over. So, and this and through the Son, filioque, this is the main dogmatic difference. The main difference in lived religious and ecclesial practice is, of course, liturgy, great liturgy, and the veneration of icons, saints, and relics. Here I have an icon, an Orthodox icon of. Do you see it? So this is just a random Orthodox icon which I had on my bookshelf of Saint Xenia of St. Petersburg, and a saint of from the 19th century. Interesting in veneration of icons and in veneration of saints is that each icon represents the whole gospel. So if you look at an icon theologically, then you can see the whole gospel in an icon, and an icon is also a kind of a window. It's not a kind of a window, but it is a window. According to Orthodox believers, it is a window to transcendent, to the beyond, to the holy. So while praying to an icon, to a saint who is depicted on an icon, you are immediately in a communication. You pass through this threshold to the divine. This is and the same happens with veneration of relics, like in Catholicism. Orthodox believers venerate relics of saints. And also in this veneration, saints represent the beyond or divine world, and are kind of intermediators between here and there. And they pray for the believers. It is believed they pray for the believers. So I thought maybe to this question I would add a couple of orientation points for you to have in our discussion with Bjorn and with our discussion with the group for later, so that you can imagine what we are talking about, because I will be talking for most, and my expertise lies with the Russian Orthodoxy and with Russia for most, and this is one of the most complex areas of the post-Soviet space, because well, in Russia, it's always everything is the worst in Russia, and most exaggerated and the most complex, because also the country maybe is too big. I think to understand the nationalism, Orthodox religious nationalism, which we experience now in the post-Soviet countries and in Russia for most, I think Dostoevsky can give us the key, because Dostoevsky was the so-called. There was this great difference in the 19th century between the so-called Slavophiles, so those who were in favor of the Orthodox Slavic identity and development of the imperium and the Russian world, and the so-called Westernizers. And Dostoevsky was well, he was not directly a Slavophile, but he influenced this first line of thought a lot. And many of the current Russian extreme nationalists, they sometimes quote from Dostoevsky. And one of the important thoughts is, for example, from Dostoevsky is, I quote, to be Russian is to be Orthodox. And in nowadays Russia, you find many times this phrase to be Russian is to be Orthodox, but also otherwise other way around, to be Orthodox is to be Russian. And we will talk about it in a minute as well. So I think those are important ideas for you to understand. And then okay.
Katya, you're breaking off right now. Yeah, I think we lost her for a moment. Can you?
The internet connection. Yes. Do you hear me now?
We can hear you again. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. Sorry. So then probably I was saying that with the communist revolution of 1917, we had this terrible disruption and distortion of religious life for 74 years in Russia. And then with the perestroika, a tremendous coming back of the church, and especially in the first years after the perestroika, people who'd never heard about church life or liturgy or confession, they used this phrase of Dostoevsky, to be Russian is to be Orthodox, and they would identify themselves with the Russian Orthodox Church without understanding anything about Russia, Orthodox Christianity or whatever. And Orthodoxy has become also the national church in Russia. And important for us is to understand also that the revival of Orthodox religious life encompassed all levels of society, and that this resulted in an increasing complexity of the Russian church's engagements with society, but also with the state, and that there are many factions within the church, and actually, it is a kind of an iceberg, and we do not understand much about this very diffused and very dynamic church life and church factions, and how does it really relate to the state. So what we have are also tops of the iceberg. Then I think what is also important for you to remember and to understand is that the Russian Orthodox Church doesn't confine with Russia, but it stretches beyond current Russian borders. It has historical jurisdictions, they are called, so regions of influence over national churches in nearly all post-Soviet states. Additionally, the Russian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate has several self-governing branches, including the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia and the Japanese Orthodox Church. And of course, the religious dynamics in these branches are different from the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia or in other post-Soviet republics. What is important to understand also in the current nationalist situation, maybe for our discussion, is also that with the war in Ukraine, that there was a great danger for the church to lose its jurisdictions in Ukraine. And that this was a very dangerous political issue for the church, and it led to a great conflict with the ecumenical patriarchate of Constantinople. And this also factually, so politically, the church lost indeed, because there is this war with Ukraine, but factually, nothing what was expected happened actually, because only a minority of the churches in Ukraine stepped over to the Ukrainian churches. So this is a very interesting development, which is yet not described very well. But of course, this all has this links to nationalism, and all these political factions are fed by nationalist interests and slogans and ideology, of course, as all this. This also has led to a very interesting development of the last 2 years, which is not described yet very well yet academically, but it is an extremely interesting development, that the Russian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate strengthens its positions, its jurisdictions, exarchates, as they are called, in the Western Europe. So they are losing they are afraid of their loss in Eastern Europe. They are strengthening the jurisdictions in Western Europe. This is extremely interesting to understand, I think. And well, maybe I can tell you, because it's maybe too long that I'm talking. Maybe Bjorn can ask the next question, and I think I gave you some directions or some how do you call it, orientation points to keep in mind.
I think what you showed us really well is that the seemingly simple question of claiming there's an unholy alliance between the state and the church in post-Soviet Russia is not a one-dimensional thing. Starting with Dostoevsky kind of saying, like, there's something about the Russian Orthodoxy that is deeply embedded in the soul of many Russians. And they wouldn't even question this, despite other religious traditions that clearly exist across the Soviet Empire and even today in Russia. Then the period where in communist Soviet Union, all religions were more or less restricted, repressed, prohibited in one way or the other. That includes the Russian Orthodox Church, but also Muslim, Jews, Protestants, and so on and so forth. And then post-Soviet Russia, where you have a resurgence of that old sense of, Russian Orthodoxy and Russia is one and the same. They should not be. This is what Russia is, and whatever the relations, we can talk about this, what the relations are to other religious minorities is secondary. It's not as important as the core. At the same time, besides the strong bonds between the church and the state in Russia today, it is also a church that goes beyond national boundaries, as you pointed out, to Western Europe, Ukraine, and other places. But that, of course, we have with the Catholic Church as well. There's a Polish Catholic Church, and yet it's of a larger universal church. So that's the complexity of things we are talking about. I think one thing that I wanted to ask you, and that I saw already on the chat, which might be maybe obvious to all of us. Now that Putin is in power and has been in power for a long time, what is the relationship between Putin's government and the Russian Orthodox Church? is Putin instrumentalizing the church? Is the church instrumentalizing him? Are they both benefiting from it, or is it just the wrong lens to look at that marriage through the lens of instrumentalization? Is something else at work here?
This is one of the most interesting and intriguing questions, also for scholars. And just to get updated, I called today with two colleagues, both scholars in Orthodox nationalism. And one of them told me a very interesting thing. I asked her something like that in this question, in this direction, and she said to me, well, yes, they try to use each other without knowing too much about each other. So it is each time that it appears that they just didn't do their housework well enough to understand really what is going on within all these structures. You know, one of the points I asked you to remember in this conversation is that it is extremely complex. So this whole Orthodox revival and religious revival in post-Soviet space, it has many factions and many directions and interests, of course. I mean, from economic just corruption to political and geopolitical interests. And as I started this talk with the whole idea behind my project is that there is no systematic reflection on what is going on, and you see exactly these factors also in this state-church relation. Also, they do not do enough research into what they are doing. Obviously, there is an alliance. And obviously, they coincide to some extent in their interests and in their politics. For example, well, there are also scholarly. The nationalism, for example, is divided following two main strains. One is the so-called imperial nationalism, imperial or civilizational nationalism, and ethno-nationalism. So obviously, one would be for, like you said, like Catholicism has a kind of a civilizational influence over the whole world. So this is exactly the claim, and in different periods after Perestroika and until recently, this was one of the major claims from the Moscow Patriarchate, which of course articulates the official position of the Russian Orthodox Church. If you want to know what is the official position, you should look what Patriarch articulates in his documents. And the Patriarch was talking about the Russian civilization, which is a kind of a construct, and you can make parallels, and those are made with this idea of Constantine of the clash of civilizations, but it's not quite the same. But some roots of it or inspirations you might talk about, and a similar thought of this imperial Russia. And the mission of Russian people, and you find in the ideology of the Kremlin. How do they inform each other? I think it has to be researched. That is an extremely interesting field of research to understand how they ideologically and philosophically also how do they relate to each other. They coincide to some points, obviously, and they are rephrased time and again. And they are also sometimes they reinforce each other, but how do they coincide exactly? It is not known. Well, this is an alliance which is not, once again, it is not always like they use themselves, because obviously sometimes their obvious and straightforward interests just do not coincide. I mean, again, this example I gave you with the Ukraine and the loss of the danger of losing jurisdictions because of war. So obviously the geopolitical interests are not the same all the time. But okay, to both sides, it would give an opportunity to strengthen the ideology of civilization, of civilizational nationalism. To be able to take over more jurisdictions or more land, obviously. And interestingly, with regards to these two dominant positions of nationalism in Russia, imperial nationalism and ethno-nationalism, the annexation of Crimea allowed Putin, for example, to ride on two horses. Because as the population of Crimea are primarily ethnic Russians, it was possible to present this act both as an in gathering of Russian lands in a strong Russian state and as defense of ethnic Russians abroad. And this is exactly the danger and the anxiety of the Baltic states, for example, nowadays. And similar moods you also find within the Russian Orthodox Church factions, at least. Officially, it is pronounced very carefully, but at least in the nationalist moods of some factions.
As far as you can tell, the Russian Orthodox Church is not one-dimensional or one unit that thinks the same on all levels. But say the hierarchy of the Russian Orthodox Church, I have two questions. Do they think of themselves as an ethnic church, that you talked about ethno-nationalism? And second, how comfortable are they with Putin's more and more aggressive political moves become more repressive and more dictatorial? Are they comfortable with that? I wish I would have the power
this
to...
is also
okay, now we hear you again.
I'm sorry. Well, this twofold question, I think that you cannot, it is absolutely not an ethnic church officially. It is a civilizational church. So to be the Russian in the imperial period, Russia already was a multicultural and multi-ethnical state, and the only restriction was, the only other who was absolutely was an absolute other to the Orthodox Church was the Jew, and also to the state. The church was always anti-Semitic as the state was. But for the rest, also the Jews could become Orthodox, and latent anti-Semitism was extremely strong within the church, always, and it remains as such, while many scholars now would say that it kind of transferred to anti-Caucasism and anti-Asian minorities. But in the root, there is also this tension between this ethno-nationalism and imperial nationalism or civilizational nationalism also within the church. So the official church, because probably it has its geopolitical interests. It would proclaim this civilizational nationalism and would try to encompass any ethnicity. And within the different factions, you have, of course, this extreme ethnic nationalism, of course. And the second question was whether the church is comfortable with Putin's claims. I think they cannot be comfortable and happy with all movements, as I said, as their jurisdictions would be endangered by some movements, but it is also not for nothing they are strengthening their positions all over the world, also in Africa actually. There seems to be some activities of the Moscow Patriarchate to enforce their influence there. So they are anticipating or reacting to something. Again, we see only the tips of the iceberg. But but officially, of course, they are always they should be officially they have to be happy. I mean, or to support, of course.
Last Friday, Anna Maria helped us to understand part of the situation in Poland by differentiating between the closed church, like more the hierarchical church that is very pro-nationalist or even nativist understanding of Poland, and the open church, where there is also people who are in the church who are protesting against it, and we try to reach out to minorities or to really have a different vision of what Christianity is. Is there something like this in Russia too? Are there people within the church that are forming a different movement, a kind of a protest movement perhaps, against what is happening?
Well, once again, and this is again the reason for my project, Anna Maria, I'm so sorry I couldn't find the video. I was so much willing to watch your video, and I hope I will do so after I have access to your presentation. I'm very curious about it, of course. There is no as yet. Russia has not brought forward any civil society, and there is no, unfortunately, there is no systematic movement to be able to, first of all, to reflect on what has happened and what is happening in the country, because of course, what is happening now, it has its roots in 74 years of communism, but there is no organized systematic protest movement in civil society nor in the church. There are always these very kind, nice people, of course, who are organized, as we know from Russian intelligentsia, you know, who are organized maybe in 2 or 3 or 5 or groups of 10. Very rarely they are organized in bigger groups. I can mention as one of the groups which is very active and does actually very great job in commemoration of the past and the past atrocities and what is happening now. And this is the group around the priest, Moscow priest Georgy Kochetkov. For example, they are doing great job in translating the texts from the Slavonic Russian to contemporary Russian, because the church language no one can understand it anymore. It's not that it's, you know, like Middle Ages in Europe. The Russians do not understand their spiritual language, which is also is operationalized by all kind of xenophobic or nationalist forces, because they, of course, they ascribe all kinds of sacred meanings to the text, which are not understandable. So this group of this priest, Georgy Kochetkov, they for 25 years, I think already, they translate the liturgic texts into Russian, and they reflect on what what is happening. But very few of these groups exist, and they are dispersed. Problem with post-Soviet Russia is also that, unfortunately, they are not organized in the sense as also they always quarrel, you know. For someone who lives, you recognize it, Anna-Marie. It's very well. It's a pity. It's kind of a tragic situation. It is for me, who lives for years in the West. I really regret it, because I didn't understand why are they quarreling all the time instead of finding each other and doing something really which is really matters. Why won't they go beyond their why are they unable to exceed beyond their smaller interests to do something bigger? But I think it is also, we cannot judge, because I think those are also painful reminiscence of the past, that people, I think those are traumas which are present in this way. And so I only regret it. It's not a value judgment, but unfortunately these groups are very separated from each other, and there is no possibility as yet to come together and to do something actively, unfortunately.
So if religious people are less organized right now, how about the secular protest movement that targets both Russian ethno-nationalism and the church today? I think we probably all know one or two examples that are being reported here in the West, but you may have a better sense of how effective they are, widespread, or what we don't know by just reading, say, the New York Times.
Well, I think the church is, of course, as always, the church is the mirror of a larger society, isn't it? And I mean, the situation would be similar to the church situation, and even worse, because I mean, in the well, I think those who those protest movements who are within the church, those are most of them are very decent people, and the groups, the post-Soviet groups outside the religious boundaries, they might be even more prone to several ideologies which might be protest, but not always beneficial. And once again, I think a broader societal reflection is needed for the society to come to terms with its past. To be and to reflect on what has happened and what is happening. There are, of course, protest movements, but also those are very much diffused, and well, I'm not very optimistic about those as well. And also the interests of separate groups are not always clear, I would say. And even intelligentsia, you know, this famous Russian intelligentsia, which in the 70s recognized each other in the metro by reading books or just by looking at each other's faces and greeting each other. Also, those, they quarrel all the time. That's exactly what I'm saying. Instead of recognizing each other's souls, they are quarreling all the time, and that's a pity.
That brings me to my last question before we open it up, and that is, if realistically what you see is going to happen in the next 10 years in Russia? And optimistically, what would you wish to happen in the next 10 years regarding the topic of our discussion today?
Yeah, well, our prophetic gifts stopped, I think, with COVID, because because who could ever think of this odd world in which we find ourselves now, and in all the possibilities. I would not like, I'm not sure I want to predict anything seriously, because there are different trends, there are different possibilities. For example, or 2 years ago, everyone was absolutely sure that this ideological trend of the Russian Orthodox Church, of the Russian civilization or Russian world they talked about, with the Russian Orthodox values and all these moods and factions against the Western fallen civilization, that they would get a lot of supporters all over the world. But now in the last 2 years, this all kind of stopped, and now there is a very strange silence going on, also with nationalists. And with the situation with COVID, it seems that people are only seriously interested only in the COVID situation, or there is a great movement against vaccinations under the religious people, for example. And well, it's very difficult to predict anything. I only see, as I told you, I talked today to two colleagues, and I see that people even didn't start to systematically reflect on what is happening. I only see that the Russian Orthodox Church is strengthening its positions everywhere. And it is obviously against the Constantinople, the ecumenical patriarchate, obviously. To what it will lead and which ideologies it will develop or build on, I do not know. And what I want to, of course, ideally, I would really hope for at least some of us who are doing this systematic research to keep on going and to make our contribution, as this great Theologina Auschwitz has done for Germany. It really changed mentalities in Germany, and I'm not as naive to think that we can change anything in this country like Russia, but at least for some groups of people to maybe what I said, to let them maybe stop quarreling, because this distracts from the most important questions actually, and all this politics it distracts from much more important theological questions, like where is God in suffering, or there are so many real questions which we have to reconsider time and again, and for which we have to work interdisciplinary and making theology of the 21st century which is reliable. So this I hope for, that we keep on going, and that we are not distracted by what happens, because now the world is facing, of course, something which we never faced, and we cannot neglect that as well. Also, this needs our attention and reflection. So I really hope that we will be together in that. So this is my hope.
Well,
thank
Katya,
you.
if we are lucky, we will see you in October here in Flagstaff, Arizona, because you and we are doing a symposium, international symposium on the legacies of Auschwitz and Gulag, with an interdisciplinary scholars coming from Bulgaria, the Netherlands, Russia, Israel, United States, Canada, UK, Germany, to exactly pursue some of these questions, or at least kind of put down some groundwork on which we can develop further these thoughts that are so important, especially for Russia right now and for rethinking. So hopefully COVID will not change that plan again. We had to postpone it from last fall to this fall, and fingers crossed it will be this fall. If not, then next spring. One day you will be here with all the other colleagues, and we will have a 4-day conference here with some public elements for which you are all invited. We have a couple of questions here, and I wonder whether, Nathan, you're just willing to actually ask directly rather than me reading what you wrote on the chat.
Okay, yeah, so I was looking at this question of whether or not, you know, like Putin and his regime, they really believe the identity connection between being Russian and being Orthodox. I mean, the Russian Federation is a multi-ethnic state, and it's slightly less than half Russian. So pushing too much ethnic nationalism, I think, would be dangerous. But you know, here in America, there's a very comfortable assumption, whichever denomination you happen to be in, that Christians will always be the majority. They'll always be able to kind of get their way, and therefore pushing a Christianized version of politics is a perfectly safe thing because we're always going to be the majority, which is coming to an end. We're about to be less than 50% Christian in this country, and that's a trend that's been going on for 50 years. So I look at those kinds of things and how that affects, you know, the idea of using religion as a nationalist unifying force. Do you think that, you know, for example, the Putin regime, it really believes in that Orthodox connection to nationalism, or are they just using it? So I would say, for example, if you look at Louis XIV and his absolutism, he was very much a true believer, but because of that, it restrained some of the things he thought he could get away with. I think that was even true of, you know, Orthodox nationalism and Peter I. I don't know that that's true of, say, for example, Hitler's regime, or even to make a more recent one, I don't think the Trump regime believed any of this stuff at all. Certainly, I don't think he believed it, but he found it very useful. And if you look at, you know, Polish nationalism, Russian nationalism, is it true believers trying to use that, or at least maybe at the top, because it's going to be different down below, or is it people who just find the religious connection useful and they know it will bolster support?
It's a very interesting question, because it leads, of course, to several several layers. First of all, one layer is for me is that I really would like to emphasize that the biographical person is never accessible. So I do not know what Putin believes himself, and to which extent he is sincere in his utterances, because I think seriously that what we do not consider carefully in the West most of the times is that Putin is a very clever person, and that he is very talented, and that these caricatures of Putin, that they have led to a lot of dangerous situations in the last 20 years. Certainly, he from the utterances which I can analyze as a scholar, I would say I'm not sure he is that profound in his own beliefs, and many times on several occasions he would make equal the codex of the party member and the credos of the Russian Orthodox Church. So it is a kind of a vacuum probably filled in by the religious beliefs to him, obviously, also ideologically. so this is the second point. So the first one is the inaccessibility of a biographical person. From there, maybe a kind of a vacuum happening, which he uses ideologically. Thirdly, there are in different times in the last 20 years, different philosophers and ideologists who feed the state ideology, and they are changing all with times. And then Putin, as each leader, would maybe absorb some ideologies. The alliance is very the church-state alliance and Orthodoxy alliance allows Putin to speak about the mission of the ethnical Russian people, and this is a kind of holy Russian mission. And it is this ethnical model. It is still very state-centered model. Yeah, I do not know whether, but it is very useful, of course, as in each country, theology and ideology always go together, and most of the time you can separate. Actually, a very interesting scholarly question: when is theology not ideology? Yeah, I really do not have a straightforward to that, but I think he will use it. Of course, he will be dumb not to use it, and we just agreed that he is a very clever person, so he will use it, obviously.
That, of course, is a big question, whether when theology is not ideology, but we leave that aside for now. Anna Maria, you also have a question or comment.
So first of all, but I can only say it in Polish, Wesołych Świąt, because it is Orthodox Easter starting now. So it is, I don't know, Bjorn, if you did this on purpose, but you have our talk about Russian Orthodoxy precisely at the beginning of Orthodox Easter. So I have a whole pad full of scribbled notes, but I think I'll just make one comment and one question, very concrete. Roman Catholicism is different from Protestantism and Orthodoxy in that Roman Catholicism is a perfect triangle. Theoretically, there is one guy at the top, and none of the other religions in the world have this kind of a hierarchy. And I think psychologically this sometimes plays out differently for Catholics than it does for Muslims, for Jews, for Protestants, and for the Orthodox, because of this psychological knowledge that there is one guy at the top, there is a father at the top. So just that comment. But now a question, Katya, I have more knowledge from the 1990s because I was going to a lot of conferences on religion then, right after we came out of communism. And I know because I lived in San Francisco for a very long time. In San Francisco, under communism, there were two Russian Orthodox parishes, because one was recognizing the Moscow Patriarch and the other one was saying, no, we are refugees in the United States and we don't want anything to do with the co-opted Patriarch. And at a conference at the end of the 1990s, at a conference, one of the speakers was a priest from a parish, an Orthodox priest from a parish 100 kilometers east of Moscow, who refused to recognize the Moscow Patriarch because Alexei II had been still appointed, had been vetted by the KGB. Have things changed? I mean, I know that Kirill, the Patriarch, is always at the inaugurations of Putin, but I don't know if he is seen as less KGB, less communistic, less if he is seen as a post-communist patriarch, or if he is seen as still infected. And that is.
Thank you, Anna-Marie, for this very important, of course, very important addition. This is a great difference, of course. Yes, so it is a very, psychologically especially, it is a very important difference. And it is actually, I think I didn't mention it because it might be also a very, very interesting field of research for post-Soviet Russia, because somehow it seems sometimes that the Orthodox Church currently is somehow not copying, maybe, but somehow developing or trying to make a PR in a very Catholic way. So it is probably this tendency which didn't bring me to this very important observation. It is interesting to note, I would say, because of course, I mean, I know the difference, but I just didn't mention it. It didn't come to my mind, and it would be telling. I think it's interesting to do research on that. Then this interesting question on the KGB involvement of the Russian Orthodox Church. I mentioned it in my answers to Bjorn, that this is part of the problem. The involvement of the church with KGB has never been revealed because the KGB archives are closed. There was no open repentance of the church about its involvement with the state, nor with the KGB. And in the current geopolitical situation, from the start of millennium, no one cares. Or I mean, it seems like no one cares. So I do not frankly know of any systematic research done into the KGB involvement of the church. And I mentioned this sanctification of the Orthodox martyrs. It seems that this was the answer of the church to the problem of the Soviet era, and not the question of complicity or guilt, or I mean, those are very complex questions. We know it from Eastern Europe that complicity doesn't mean this not always means this very straightforward guilt. Sometimes it was the only way to survive, also as a church. And also that should be reflected on in a very nuanced and systematic way, isn't it? Those are very important questions, but they are not scrutinized because it is not important enough, obviously, or something, unfortunately.
Well, surprisingly, we are ending where we started, namely with the strong emphasis on martyrs and martyrdom in relationship to post-Gulag, post-Stalin Russian area, and not taking away from the fact that it's good to remember people who died, and priests and religious people died in the camp, but that this in itself could be instrumentalized as a memory to cover up other forms of complicity. And yes, you're absolutely right, Katya. It's always easier in after some atrocities on a massive scale happen to portray an institution as a victim rather than as someone complicit or an accomplice. And we've had that in Germany with the German churches for several decades before you fully came around to acknowledge Auschwitz as what it was. And that seems to be the step you're still missing is happening in Russia today. This pretty much brings us exactly to our 75 minutes and to the end of our conversation today. Katya, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, Anna-Maria, for joining us from Poland also. I did not know it was the beginning of Orthodox Easter, but I'm all the more happier that it was mentioned and that, Katya, you joined us anyway today. Thank you for all of you for attending. Look at our Facebook webpage when we have new programs coming up. And we'll see you again soon and later.
Wow.